Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahushai, Bahasham, Rechak Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Zechariah, the 13th chapter, pretty much continuing from where we left off in the 12th chapter. Now in Zechariah, the 13th chapter, it's really going into at least for the first part, deals with these false prophets, and the Lord pretty much putting an end, to the deception, the false prophets, the idols, and ultimately delivering the elect. All right. But it's written, as most chapters in the book of Zechariah are, it's written in, a parabolic form. But it has a message that is being conveyed. All right. So this is Zechariah chapter 13, verse 1. And you can see the headline or the subheading, False Prophets Ashamed. In that day, there shall be a fountain opened to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanness. Now, that fountain represents this truth. And by this truth, I mean the correct and true knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, of the Holy Bible. Because it is by that we would gain that path, towards being forgiven of our sins and being made clean again. Because in order to truly understand the fullness of the scriptures, you need the spirit of Yahushai. You need to believe upon Yahushai. So hence it is through him, as the scriptures say, lo, he comes in the volume of the book, it is written of him. Right now, the house of David and the inhabitants of Jerusalem here is a representation of the elect, of the nation of Israel. All right, that includes all 12 tribes. But those that have been elected to be delivered first out of the nation. So by way of this truth, we would be made, sinless and clean again. Which we're in the process of that, but it starts with the mind. So I want to go to the precept here in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 36, verse 25. It says here, let's read this from 24. For I will take you from among the heathen, and the you is referring on to the nation of Israel, but in particular the elect of the nation of Israel. So I will take you from among the heathen and gather you out of all countries and bring you into your own land. Right. And that right there goes to show you that this precept parallels other precepts that describe the Lord delivering, the chosen from amongst these different nations. Right. But here in particular, it mentions bringing you into your own land. That's a separation, right? Because if the land, and we know that the context here, the subject is Israel. So who would or what land would belong to Israel? The land of Israel. All right. Hence it is called such. Verse 25, then will I sprinkle clean water upon you. Right. As we read in Zechariah 13, likened unto the fountain. But here it says, I will sprinkle clean water upon you, and ye shall be clean from all your filthiness and from all your idols. Will I cleanse you? A new heart also will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you. And I will take away the stony heart out of your flesh, and I will give you an heart of flesh. And this is pretty much the end, the end of the journey that we are in right now. So by way of this truth, which is able to make us wise unto salvation, we're on this journey, right? As Ezra puts it, walking, on a narrow area where you have a fire on the one side, and deep waters on the left side. Well, we're not going to be walking on that area forever. Eventually, we're going to get to that destination, and that destination is going to be when the Lord, comes back and delivers us and makes us perfect. All right. And so by way of giving us that new heart and all of that is by the Lord renewing our spirit and also giving us those new bodies. Okay, those bodies which will be sinless. They won't be like this corruptible, sinful flesh. Next, let's go to the book of Titus, chapter 3, verse 5. It says here, not by works of righteousness which we have done, but according to his mercy, he saved us. So we understand that our salvation, all right, which begins with the Lord taking us out of the worldly mindset, that destructive path that we were on. That wasn't by us being righteous or us being, some super holier than thou individuals, but rather because the Lord decided to have mercy upon us by the washing of regeneration, right? Once again, there, because what do you wash with? You wash with water, all right? So there goes that connection again, right? Back to that fountain, and the washing of regeneration and renewing of the Holy Spirit that comes by way of this truth. Okay. It says, which he shed on us abundantly through Yahushua HaMashiach, our Savior, that being justified by his grace, we should be made heirs according to the hope of eternal life. Okay, so going back to Zechariah 13 and 1, that fountain that shall be opened to the house of David and to the inhabitants of Jerusalem for sin and for uncleanness it starts here with this knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Okay, that'll lead us to that point of being made perfect and sinless and 100% clean. Verse 2, and it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land. So now, you notice it keeps mentioning in that day. So this is future tense, right? And when you jump back to the 12th chapter, it mentions that as well, right? The Lord talks about how he's going to defend Jerusalem in that day. In that day, the house of David and their wives apart, the house of Nathan and their wives apart are going to mourn, for the Lord as one mourneth for their only son. So it mentions a lot of these things, and in that day is really representing the future tense. Okay, so in some verses it's talking about in the kingdom, in some verses it's talking about at the return of Yahushua, in some verses it's talking about the destruction of this place of America. Okay, all in all, it's prophetic. But as it says here, and it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols out of the land. Now this land is talking about the land of America, or Babylon the Great. And the names of the idols doesn't just mean the actual names, but the memorial, okay, or the reputation. And if we go into that word names, because that's what a name is, right? The reason somebody's name rings a bell in your head is because of what you think of when you hear their name, right? That is what the name carries. The reputation, the thoughts, the feelings, all of those things. When you hear the name of your enemy, it invokes an ill feeling within you because you maybe have encountered them or have certain memories or perceptions of them. So there's a reputation or a stigma associated with the name. And that's really the power of the name. It's what it represents. All right. And then likewise, you have a name of a loved one, which gives you the opposite feeling. Right. So when you go into the word name here, you have sham in the Hebrew. And it says name, reputation, fame, glory, memorial, monument. So when the Lord says he's going to cut off the names of the idols, meaning the Lord is going to cut off the remembrance, the memorial, the fame, and the glory of the idols in this land. And there are a whole bunch of idols here, okay, which are these pseudo gods that have built this mass following behind them, okay, and has been pushed. And a lot of them really stem back to these ancient kingdoms and their deities, and have been revived in this time under different names, and then the so-called holy days that were used, the rituals and stuff that were used to commemorate these deities, have been brought back in this time. But once again, they're called by different names, and they're turned into what looks like festivities. Okay, but the Lord, like for example, the whole Jesus Christ and Allah and all these other forms of idols, the Lord is going to cut them off And how is he going to do that? By destroying, okay, this land, okay, by bringing the judgment upon not just America, but the world. And from that period on, by Yahushua and the elect, the world is going to be purged, okay, of the remembrance and the worship of these idols. And eventually they would be, they will be completely cut off, because the truth is going to permeate and everybody's going to be on that one accord to know that there's only one true living power, all right, which is Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai. And they shall no more be remembered. See? So after they're cut off, there's going to be no more gatherings of worshipers of Jesus Christ, or worshipers of Allah, or worshipers of Buddha, or worshipers of whatever beliefs they have that is not Yahweh Bahasham Yahushai. So there will be no more remembered, right? Baal, Molech, right? The Jesus Christ and the other ones, these are more mainstream ones, but there are still a whole lot of other idols that these secret societies actually worship in their true forms. Like, they don't disguise their names. They know, for example, who Molech or what kind of deity Molech is, and they worship them as such. It is for the public that they sugarcoat it or cover it up with some other name and festivity and then push it out to them. Anyway, and also I will cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass out of the land. And the prophets here are referring to the false prophets. Okay, so how is the Lord going to cause them to pass out of the land? By destroying them. Okay, and the unclean spirit being that spirit of deception that influenced these prophets as well as deceive the people. All of that is going to be purged out when the Lord brings that destruction. Okay, verse 3, and it shall come to pass that when any shall yet prophesy, then his father and his mother that begat him shall say unto him, to begat meaning they birthed him, shall say unto him, thou shalt not live, for thou speakest lies in the name of the Lord Yahweh. And his father and his mother that begat him shall thrust him through when he prophesieth. Now, this is not, it doesn't mean like in a literal sense that your parents are going to come, the parents of all these false prophets are going to come and grab knives and stab them whenever they prophesy. But what it's saying here is that in that day, the truth is going to be revealed, and it's going to be shown that these false prophets were liars. And so whenever they prophesy or try to, play that role, anything they say is not going to be believed. In fact, people are actually going to come against them, because the eyes of the people are going to be opened when they see that these false prophecies that these false prophets made did not come to pass, and they see the actual truth and the true prophecies coming to pass, and they're going to be upset and angry at these false prophets. Hence this analogy here likened onto somebody prophesying and their parents saying unto them, you're not going to live because you're prophesying or you're speaking lies in the name of the Lord. So that deception is going to wear off, and it's going to be made known that these guys don't know what they're talking about. And that's going to incur a lot of wrath from people that are going to seek to come after them, be it their congregation or all the people they've misled, or whatever the case is. So in other words, that's what verse 3 is saying here, that people's eyes are going to be opened to the lies and the deception of these false prophets, and they're no longer going to believe them anymore. In fact, they're going to seek to come after them. All right. Verse 3, it's like one example I'll give is, imagine somebody who is conning people, right? Maybe like this guy at the park who always invites people to come and play chess or checkers with him, but he has a way to always win because he's cheating them. And eventually, people start to question, and then they find out, yo, this guy's been cheating this whole time. So the next time he comes to the park and he tries to invite somebody to a chess game, they're going to be like, oh, hell no, you a cheater. And then they're going to get mad, and then they're going to come after him. Right? It's similar here. These false prophets, people are going to realize that they've been selling them a false dream. And then the next time they try to do it, people are going to be, hell no, you ain't, we're not falling for that anymore. Okay. Verse 4, and it shall come to pass in that day that the prophets shall be ashamed every one of his vision when he prophesieth, or when he prophesied, neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive. So basically, by the truth coming out, these false prophets are going to be put to shame, because now it is going to be publicly known that the things that they were saying were not true, that they were deceiving the people, and all the things, whether the things they said would happen or would not happen, the things they said would happen don't happen, and the things they said would not happen actually happen. And they're going to be ashamed, all right, of these things, as it says, neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive. So, like a basic example would be Bishop Nathaniel on that TV show. I think it was with a Jamaican host, an older man, who asked him if there would be a time like Jacob's trouble ever, and he blatantly said no on video. And then now that we're starting to see the actual signs and effects of Jacob's trouble, and brothers have done many videos on it, now it's made apparent that, hey, you adamantly said that there would never be such a time like that. We would not go through such a time like that. How do you explain what's going on now? And now you look what? You look, disgraced. Okay. So that's just like one example to sort of give that concept or paint that picture. And it says, neither shall they wear a rough garment to deceive. Now, a rough garment was, the majority of prophets did not come around in, top sleek, top-notch garments. Okay, because majority of the prophets were regular men. I believe Amos was a sheep herder, if I'm not mistaken, or somewhere along those lines. But that's the point right there, right? Even like John the Baptist. So usually when you would see the prophets, that's the attire that they would be, in, right? Sheep's hair, camel's hair, goat's hair, whatever garment hair, whatever material the garment was made of. But when it says here, they shall not wear a rough garment to deceive, it means that they're not gonna give the appearance, okay, of being a true prophet to be able to deceive others, because people are gonna see through it now. Okay. Verse 5, but he shall say, I am no prophet, I am an husbandman, for a man taught me to keep cattle from my youth. See, and that's when it's revealed that these guys are just regular men. They're not actually sent by the Lord, though they gave off this appearance, this image, as though they were these great holy men, and people believed what they said. But now it's going to be revealed that these guys were just regular men playing the role, like playing prophet, playing make-believe, but they weren't truly inspired by Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahweh Shai to do this. Okay, now in the actual, in these verses, in the actual contextual example or analogy being given here, you can imagine, right, somebody who is one that keeps cattle, like a shepherd or a herdman or a husbandman, right? And then they get up one day and they go and put on a rough garment to make it look like they're a prophet. And they start going around and telling people, oh, the Lord said this, the Lord said that. And then eventually it gets found out that this guy's not an actual prophet. He's just a regular shepherd or husbandman who just put on a garment, like literally like a rough garment to look like a prophet and to go around and deceive people. Okay. So in the literal example, you can imagine something like that. But what it represents is people given the perception as though they are truly men of the Lord, sent by the Lord. But in actuality, they are false prophets deceiving the people. And when that's revealed, they're going to be ashamed. And it's going to be shown that these guys are just regular men. Okay. Verse 6, and no one, Slakia, and one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow, saith the Lord Yahweh of hosts. Smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. And these verses here are referring to Yahweh Shai. Okay, and that's once again, the interesting and tricky part about the scriptures, which is why, if you don't have the Spirit of the Lord with you, you won't really be able to tell, right? How do you know that from verse 5 to 6 it just jumps, and now verse 6 and 7 are referring to a prophecy about Yahweh Shai, right? But anyway, let's get a few precepts on that. So dealing with verse 6, right, it says, and one shall say unto him, what are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer, those with which I was wounded in the house of my friends. And this is what ended up this is what ended up happening to Yahushua, right? Remember when he was crucified, right? Just how the crucifixion works. You know, they nail you to a cross, right? And now let's actually go. Let's get a precept real quick to the book of Psalms 22 and 16, and this is a precept. I believe this is King David. Yeah, and he was prophesying, and within this psalm, he prophesies about Yahushua. So verse 16, I'm just going to hit the point here. For dogs have compassed me, the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. Okay. I may tell all my bones, they look and stare upon me. They part my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. And this is exactly what they did to Yahushua when he actually came on the scene over 2,000 years ago. Okay. But the point that I wanted to get here was the piercing, okay, of his hands and his feet, right, causing those wounds. And these were done, or this was consented onto by Israelites, those that were supposed to be of the Lord's own people. Okay. And so now let's go to the book of John, chapter 20, verse 19. And I'm going to jump around in here, but just to hit the point. This is John chapter 20, verse 19. Then the same day at evening, being the first day of the week, when the doors were shut. See what now? Just a side note. You notice how they mention the first day of the week, but it never mentions Monday or Sunday or Tuesday or Wednesday. They weren't using that. First off, in our customs, there was no such thing as Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. All right. There was, yes, the first day of the week, the second day of the week. But then how do you actually tell the starting point and the ending point? Anyway, that's a lesson for another time. But we know it's based off of the moon. Okay. Particularly the new moon ushering in the beginning of the month. Nevertheless, it says, when the doors were shut, where the disciples were assembled for fear of the Jews, came Yahushua and stood in the midst, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. And when he had so said, he shewed unto them his hands and his side. Then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord. Why were they glad? Because they saw the proof that that was him. Because they saw him put to death. They saw him crucified, right? Then he was taken off the cross. He was buried. Okay. And then guess what? He was raised back up again. So now what I want to do is read this in another translation, in particular the NLT. As he spoke, he showed them the wounds, right? What are these wounds with which you were wounded, like we're reading of in Zechariah? He showed them the wounds in his hands and his side. They were filled with joy when they saw the Lord, because they knew that that was him. Now I'm going to jump down to verse 24. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Yahushua came. The other disciples therefore said unto him, We have seen the Lord. But he said unto them, Except I shall see his hands, or see in his hands the print of the nails, and put my finger into the print of the nails, and thrust my hand into his side, I will not believe. And after 8 days, again, his disciples were within, and Thomas with them. Then came Yahushua, the doors being shut, and stood in the midst, and said, Peace be unto you. Then saith he to Thomas, Reach hither thy finger, and behold my hands, and reach hither thy hand, and thrust it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. Okay, so now let's go back to the book of Zechariah 13, continuing from verse 7. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man that is my fellow. And once again, this is still dealing with Yahushua. The shepherd being Yahushua, the fellow also being Yahushua. And it says, saith the Lord of hosts. Now, why is it mentioning the sword being against him? Because that sword represented Yahushua being put to death, to be crucified. Okay. Smite the shepherd, which was Yahushua, and the sheep shall be scattered. And this happened, right, when the troops, right, came for Yahushua. Okay, and they eventually took him. What happened to the disciples, which were those represented here as the sheep? They scattered, they fled, right? Everywhere, every which way. Okay, and I believe it was later that Peter and John that followed Yahushua. Okay, it says here, and I will turn mine hand upon the little ones. And when you go into the word turn, it means to restore. So even after this, what did the Lord do? He still put that spirit to restore and to gather the little ones. All right, which back then started with the disciples who became apostles, but this spread on out to the believers, i.e. the elect, even up until this time. Okay. And now jump into verse 8. And it shall come to pass that in all the land, saith the Lord Yahweh, and this land is dealing with the land of America, specifically North America. Okay, that in all the land, saith the Lord Yahweh, 2 parts therein shall be cut off and die, but the third shall be left therein. Now the 2 parts in the land that shall be cut off and die is a representation of 66.6, which is 2/3, okay, of Israelites here in America. All right, those are the 2 parts that are going to be cut off and die, meaning they're going to be left here and caught up in the destruction in here, and they're not going to be delivered. But the third shall be left therein, and them being left therein, meaning they're going to be delivered. Okay, and that third represents the, once again, one third of Israelites in America here, which are going to be delivered. They are the elect within America. Okay, but they are not the elect as a whole, because outside of America, you're going to have elect Israelites that will still be delivered. But here is particularly dealing with the ratio in America. Verse 9, or Babylon. Verse 9, and I will bring the third part through the fire. See, so they're going to be left there, meaning they're going to be preserved. And I will bring them through the fire and will refine them as silver is refined. So by bringing them through the fire, the Lord is basically purifying and making them better by trying them. And that's why, Lord willing, we're of the elect. We go through the trials that we go through now to make us better, to strengthen our spirit, and to purge out the old man out of us. Okay, and I will try them as gold is tried. Because how is silver refined and how is gold tried? In fire, in heat. And that's likened unto adversity. And they shall call on my name, and I will hear them, and I will say, it is my people, and they shall say, the Lord Yahweh is my God. And now I'm going to get one last precept to support this, and we can go to the book of Wisdom of Solomon, the 3rd chapter. All right, now this is Wisdom of Solomon chapter 3. Verse 5, it says, and having been a little chastised, they shall be greatly rewarded. Who is that? That's the elect. Okay, they shall be greatly rewarded, for God proved them and found them worthy for himself. As gold in the furnace hath he tried them, and received them as a burnt offering. And in the time of their visitation, they shall shine and run to and fro like sparks among the stubble. Okay, so there's a precept there, right, supporting Zechariah 13:9 about that the third part being brought through the fire and being refined as silver is refined and being tried as gold is tried. Okay, anyway, that brings us to the end of the book of Zechariah, the 13th chapter. Lord willing, this was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Rachak Kudash. Until next time, Shalom.